We are going to call the Novi Board of Education regular meeting to order. Tonight is February 21st, and I'd like to take just a brief moment for a moment of silence for the Michigan State victims and all the students and anyone who was inadvertently or directly affected. You can please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. If I can get a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
So moved. Support.
Recommended by Mr. Smith and supported by Mr. Cook. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Now we'll move on to our celebrations. I'm going to start with Mr. Meinka.
That sounds great. We had a really cool thing happen actually just this past week. And the Michigan Association of Administrators of Special Education annually award and recognize one person across the entire state of Michigan to receive the Patricia Gilchrist Frazier Award. And this award is given to a special education director in the state of Michigan who has demonstrated outstanding service and leadership to her or his local school district. And I'm just very impressed and proud to say that our own Ms. Shaylee Patel is the person who was awarded that award this year. So Shaylee is here. She's already gotten this award, but I want to make sure she gets this. So.
Speak.
And one other thing that I would add is that she is the first Indian-born woman to earn the award in the history of the award being given out. So that's another very cool opportunity for her. So congratulations, she's doing great work.
Congratulations, Shaylee. And just to add to the fun, when Shaylee was awarded this award just this last week, I think, she was surprised by not only some colleagues, but her entire family was there to surprise her. So the pictures don't probably do it justice, but they were really fun to see and to see all your efforts being celebrated. So congratulations again. Do we have any more celebrations that anybody would like to share?
Oh, Jason, you can go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Yes, so I was lucky enough to attend Deerfield's Multicultural Festival. It was a really well attended. The entire gym was packed. The Novi Public Library had a table there. We had Japanese culture, German culture. We had an African American and Black cultural table. There was so many different. There was a Korean table. It started off with like 2 or 3, and by the end, I think we had maybe closer to double digits represented there. So it was a really fantastic night. And then also, just recently, I got to attend Deerfield's Black History Month Trivia Night, which was started right before the pandemic, and then this is the first year bringing it back since then. And the students come and they have a Black History Month calendar with a bunch of Black Americans that have made significant contributions to our country, and that is where all the questions come from. So hopefully they've been reading their calendars every night, and they have to leave them at the door when they come in. They come in and they get to use buzzers and the whole 9 yards. And at first it was table versus table. We had Principal Ryan Francis competing against a student at one point. We had the co-presidents of the PTO go head to head for a question. It was really fun, and at the end it was a lightning round where kids just kind of stood at their table in like a sprinter stance, and the question would be read and they'd run up to the table and slap the buzzer. They just had a blast. So it was really cool. A lot of fun and a lot of learning too. So I think that was a really positive event.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Do we have any more celebrations to share? Mrs. Bodwine?
Okay, so I apologize in advance, it's a little bit lengthy. First, I would like to recognize Black History Month and thank the people in our district that have made efforts to celebrate our African-American students and their history this month and all year round. I'd also like to recognize PASN and their contributions to our community as a whole and our Black students specifically. Our Black students, staff, and family are a valuable part of our community, and I'm personally inspired learning about our history together and the resilience and determination of Black Americans throughout history. Second, February 6th through the 10th was School Counselor Appreciation Week. I see we have Ms. Leppert here this evening, so congratulations and thank you for all of your hard work. Thank you for all of the hard work of our school counselors, for everything you do to ensure that our students have all of the resources and tools that they need to be successful. School counselors have a very unique position that has some pretty specialized requirements. Our school counselors, of course, help to manage our students' needs when they're having an emergency or having to navigate some particularly difficult situation. But they also need to be able to audit graduation requirements and look at a lot of data specific to our kids to make sure that they're fully prepared to graduate on time. I find it to be a very unique skill set and a very remarkable individual that can manage data and feelings on the same day. I think those are usually very contradictory skills. So we're really blessed to have such a remarkable counseling staff in our district. I would also like to give a special shout out to two of our counselors that I know have made a big difference with some of our students in the last couple of months. Mrs. Tobis at the high school has started a student support group for students that are experiencing grief and loss. There are almost 20 students in the group at different stages of the grieving process. Mrs. Kilgore at the middle school also runs a similar group and has for a few years now. We all know that navigating grief and loss are uncomfortable and hard to do, and I would like to thank Mrs. Kilgore and Mrs. Tobis for taking that on. These groups were designed to allow students to meet others who can understand the unique difficulties that they are dealing with. These groups have had a lot of great feedback from participants, and while this is not necessarily a happy topic, I do want to celebrate our counselors and every student that joined these groups. Forming or joining a group like that requires bravery and vulnerability, and I want to celebrate that and wish every member of that group peace and love moving forward. And then finally, this is not at all a celebration, but I do want to give recognition to my other school, Michigan State University, for the resilience and compassion that they have shown each other this past week. The tragic events that occurred there have left scars on so many Spartans, but also on many of our Wildcats as well. There are many parents and educators in Novi with ties to Michigan State. Either they went there like I did, or have children there now like Mr. Smith, and a number of our other educators. Many of our teachers, parents, students, and community members had some pretty long hours on Monday night waiting to hear if their loved ones were safe. We all know a Wildcat that went on to become a Spartan, and more of us than I care to think about know someone who experienced this emergency firsthand. I would like to thank our educators for everything that they have taught our students regarding school safety and what they should do in an emergency. I am devastated to know that these skills were tested, and I am very thankful for any layer of safety and that this knowledge granted our students. My many thanks to the police departments that ran towards danger on Monday, as well as the mental health professionals that have run towards this community's pain. Seeing my East Lansing family and friends welcoming students back to campus has reminded me again that we can all make a difference in this world. As the shock wears off and sadness remains, please take a look around your community and see what you can do to add a little more good back into the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Bodwine. Do we have any other celebrations? Mr. Smith?
Thanks, Betsy. On a little lighter note, this past Friday, our theater department traveled up to Mount Pleasant, Central Michigan University, and competed with the state competition for one-act plays. And our group, led by Heather McKegg and our own Justin Jarvis, who helps produce this show on a weekly basis or whatever, was leading the group. And the Novi group came in second place in the state competition for their production of These Shining Lives. It really was quite an effort. As a recovering theater major, I can share with you that you never know what those theater people end up becoming. Some board trustees, but it really took the whole group. So those that are on the stage, those that put up the production. If you've never seen a competitive theater group, the crew is really scored, if you will, from the time the set hits the stage until the final curtain. Everything's timed right down to the minute. So everything from costumes and makeup and, you know, the production of the actual set, the construction of that, and the actors on the stage all contribute to that. The winning production was a play called 26 Pebbles, which chronicles the events at Sandy Hook. So that was probably a timely production this past Friday. But our Wildcats brought home second place, which I think is a great accomplishment, and congratulations to all those involved.
Thank you, Mr. Smith.
I have two.
And Mr. Bennett?
Yeah, I wanted to give a big shout out to the Novi Athletic Department. In 2017, under the leadership of Brian Gordon, the Novi Athletic Broadcast Network was founded and continues today under the support of current athletic director Don Wachowski. This past week, the network broadcasted its 800th event. So 800 events since 2017. And the total views on those events have surpassed 30,000 views. So there have been viewers around the globe, family members from students living around the globe as far as Lisbon, Portugal. We've had people send emails on that. And then to this day, the most watched event was a 2019 girls basketball game between Novi and Northville, a game that ended at the buzzer, won by Novi. So again, wanted to thank the athletic department for their support and all they do in this area.
Thank you, Mr. Mena. Seeing no other comments, I think we will move on in our agenda. We have reports to the board. This evening we have two. We're going to begin with our iReady mid-year data review, and I will just turn it over to Mr. Meinka.
Thank you very much. So in the state of Michigan, there's a statute 98C which requires school districts to report out on data that they receive from their diagnostic assessment tool. As you know, we use iReady, and we had actually just received this data. This profile came in last week, and so we sent it to you. Mr. Dinkelman is here tonight to give a very brief, high-level overview and prepared our presentation that we're supposed to get tonight. So, Mr. Dinkelman.
Good evening. Thank you for having me this evening. So just as a reminder of what iReady is, it's the benchmark diagnostic that we use. It's given 3 times a year. This year, for the first time, we have gone K through 9. Up until this year, it was a K through 6 diagnostic that we used. And so we added 7th, 8th, and 9th grade this year. We do it fall, winter, and spring. And it's an adaptive diagnostic that moves along with the kids as far as, I don't know what I pushed. That adapts as it gets harder and finds the kid's level and goes through that. In addition to this assessment, we have the online instructional piece that students use between the assessments. It's the part, it's just basically used to help them in between the diagnostics. Based on the diagnostic score, it gives them help with math and help with reading in the areas that they were deemed to be deficient on the first diagnostic. Some things I'd like you to consider, as Mr. Meinka said, you know, we just got these, and so we're digging into them, and so you're going to have questions this evening. These are things that I think that we'll come back and talk a little bit more. We did have the change in who participated this year. You know, as I said, we moved to we added 7th, 8th, and 9th grade. We added close to 1,400 more math students this winter than last winter, and we added 1,600 more reading, our students to take the reading diagnostic. We give the math up through 9th grade, but really we give it up through Algebra 1. So any student who has surpassed Algebra 1 in 7th, 8th, or 9th grade, it did not take this assessment. And so that's why you see the difference between reading and math. You're going to see bar colors displayed, and what they're displaying is what was the beginning of the year placement based on what is the end of year, what students are expected to know by the end of the year. The diagnostic does not take into consideration the curriculum path, and so when we're looking at reading or math, something may be covered, say geometry in 3rd grade, might not have all been covered by now But inside of iReady, they're going to expect certain things to be covered. That may not have been covered in our scope and sequence of curriculum. And then this is something that we're really going to spend time with, as Mr. Micah said, and I've said too. We've only just gotten this data, and so we haven't had a ton of time to dig into it, but we promise that we will be back to talk more about it. So where I want to start with is within mathematics. This is a performance versus growth chart, and you can see that all of our grade levels are up in that upper right quadrant, and so that is the high growth and high performance quadrant. When we speak with iReady, they look at this and they talk about, they don't see many districts that have this type of performance. That dotted line represents the national median percentile growth for 16 to 18 weeks. 16 to 18 weeks is how many weeks in between the diagnostics. And so most of our grade levels are above that line, with all of them near that line. Many times what you see with districts is they either land in the low performance, high growth, upper left hand, or the high performance, low growth, lower right hand corner. But we in Novi, we have great students, great teachers, and we're able to hit that peak performance of high growth and high performance. So what this shows is how our students have done over time. And so what this is this is a cohort report. This has followed the same set of students over time. And so when you look at the current third grade, what that is it starts in winter 1920, moves to winter 2021. The winter 2021 was left out because we had a high anomalies of number of students who took it at home. And so that's why that's not in there. And so what that current third grader is, that's our kindergartner in 1920. And so current third grade is our kindergartners, then we have first, I don't know what's happening. And so what this shows is that our students are holding, if not growing, over time. Now, this is just this winter. And so when we look at these bars, this is representing our students' placement this winter. And so what this doesn't show you is where they were in the fall. It doesn't show you where they were last year. Okay, this is purely based upon their performance level for this winter. And so as you look across the top with that overall distribution, the 43% represents the 43% that are at or above grade level. The 23% are those that have begun to hit grade level. The 28% are one grade level behind. That light pink is students that are called 2 grade levels behind, and then the dark red is 3 or more grade levels behind. And then that blue bar, the progress to annual typical growth, that's just a measurement of every student when they take the fall assessment is given a growth goal. And if you hit that growth goal, you have hit 100%. So our median, not average, but our median is the midpoint. So our students have hit 64% of their growth. And then it begins to break down into growth by race. And you can see that this swings all over the place for our different races. And these are things that, this is where our district is really going to start and begin to dig in and find those data points, break it down by grade level, break it down by school, break it down and cross-reference that with race, with other indicators. It jumped to the next one, which is on the top. I have combined a couple slides, and so this is the Hispanic and Latino on the top of it, along with our English language learner. 1/3 of our population is English language learner. And so it's very important that we begin to dig into to this part as well and see how best we can serve that population. Then two of the most important ones are economically disadvantaged and our special education. And so these are things that we want to look at. And we know that this is just a single layer of the onion, that when we dig more into this, we're going to have to cross-compare things about economically disadvantaged and how that affects with, or how that coincides with special education, with race. But these are just those high-level pieces that iReady has given us, along with that progress to annual typical growth. And then we have the reading piece, and we jump back into there, and you can see, again, Novi is in that high-performance, high-growth piece. Every year, that they've given us these reports, sixth grade has been up at the top. I don't want you to miss that. Sixth grade is up above where it says high performance and high growth. And so it's not that they're not there, it's just that they're all the way at the top. And so our students are making great growth. Again, as a reminder, the current third graders are our kindergartners, first grade, second grade, third grade, and fourth grade across for that piece as we grew from winter of 1920 to the winter of 2020, 22-23. For the most part, we see continuous growth within these pieces. Sorry, this thing is jumping around. And so then we have our relative placement. Again, looking at these different pieces and beginning to look in and how this changes, even when we begin to look at how does math compare to reading. Because we see some differences when we have this math versus reading. And again, peeling back those layers to begin to think about our student groups and how it changes from math to reading, but how it changes within the student groups when we look at the in between that. Our Hispanic and Latino, our English learners, and then the economically disadvantaged and the special education piece. Now, there is no one piece of data that tells the whole story. And so as we talk about that, iReady is one piece of data. The other assessments that we use quite a bit are the Fontes and Pinnell for early literacy. We have begun to use our Advantage Math Recovery assessments to help identify the struggles that some of our students have in math. We also use Writing Pathways to look at the writing piece of it. We have our unit assessments that are used across the board. And then we also have M-STEP that we have used over the years. So I apologize for the jumping around. It's like there's a ghost up here. So, but again, this is a very, very high-level overview and one that I promise that we will be back to talk more in depth about it. But I also would like to, if you have any questions, if I can answer them, I will. But more importantly, also write down things that, when we do come back, what are things that you're going to be looking for out of the Office of Academics to talk about these pieces?
And one of the things that I think jumps out when we look at the preliminary data, and like I said, we just got it last week, but we continue to see a trend with our subgroup populations, particularly our Black students, also our special education, as well as our economically disadvantaged children, where that gap is not only existing but potentially growing. And so I know I had a couple conversations with some of the members on the board, and I think it would be good for us to schedule a joint meeting of probably the DEI and curriculum committee to really kind of dive into this further and be able to look at, what's going on and what's happening. And I know Mr. Mishner had, suggested that as well, so.
Yeah, I'd actually like to make a motion. I'd move that the 2023 iReady winter and 2022 spring state assessment reports be referred to the DEI committee and the curriculum committee to develop, in conjunction with the staff, a plan of action to address the low math and ELA placement scores of Black or African American and Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander student populations, and present that plan to the board on March 16th, 2023 at the board meeting. I've made copies of this motion just so it's clear, so that you can see everything in front of you. And if it's supported, I'd look forward to having a discussion about it.
Do we have support?
I would support it if we could amend the date to try to bring that back to the board in April, so that we would have an adequate amount of time to review it. I don't know how that works in the parliamentarian process, but,
So if we get a support, we can have discussion and then we can work on amendments to the motion.
okay, I would support for discussion then.
Okay, so we need to vote on whether
Apparently.
we can accept this, correct?
Well,
As amended.
So since it's supported, now we can have discussion and then we can take a vote on any amendments and then ultimately on the motion itself.
Okay, so does anyone have any comments or discussion?
So I'll give some context to this. So like the rest of you on the board, I think I got my packet Friday. I really didn't get into it until Saturday. But as I started drilling through it, I just kept taking notes on all the things. But what really stood out to me is those particular student groups in this motion especially when I went back and I looked at the presentation from October, when we went over the spring state assessment, on how those groups continually aren't performing to their potential. And I want to do something to support them. So I want to emphasize, that's not the only thing that we can focus on. I think there's other really great things in this data that I'd like to go into, probably in the committee review. But I wanted to focus on this, and the reason why I felt it was important to have a deadline in it is to make so that it is a SMART goal, so that it has an actual timeline to it, the T in SMART. And March coming back with a plan doesn't mean we solve it. It doesn't mean that I expect the DEI and curriculum committee to magically solve a problem that Novi, Michigan, the nation has been struggling with for decades. But I do want to have a plan, because if we don't have a plan, we plan to fail. Like, we got to start somewhere. So we can adapt, amend, change the plan, but I feel like we need to start somewhere. I feel like it's reasonable in a couple of weeks to come up with a plan. It doesn't have to be fully fleshed out, but we should be able to come back after, a meeting, or maybe if we need an additional one, and present to the rest of the board, not on those committees, or if you're all present at the committee of the whole, a plan for how we can, start making some progress. Not solve the problem immediately, but at least start, because ultimately, 2 to 3 months sounds reasonable for us all getting this information now, but there are parents and students in the audience that 2 to 3 months, they're almost out of the school district for our seniors. Or they're moving on from elementary school to Meadows, or from Meadows to middle school. And I feel like, they've waited years for the board to support them, so I want to do so as much as we can, as quickly as we can. And, we can kind of amend it on the fly, but I feel like to do nothing or to delay, defer it, is denying, those students that are most affected some help when they really need it. And I feel like this will also support our teachers, because we as a board lead, with our leadership, we can take some of the burden off of them, because they're gonna deal with this regardless of whether we vote to support this or not, whether we come up with a plan next month or not. They're gonna be dealing with the reality of this situation in our classroom, either on their own, or they can see that their board sees the problem and wanna help. And that's the purpose, that's the heart behind this motion. So I hope you all support it.
I'll go, and then we can, so although I agree with you, Jason, I think that this is important. It's something we've been asking for a while. We've been asking for these data gaps and whatnot. Previously, probably last year, there was some lack of information due to the pandemic, and there was not the enormity of reporting that we're going to see moving forward. I think that there is a process in place, and to me, this isn't it. I think that having a joint committee put together, and out of respect for our staff and giving them time to digest and look at all the other data points that they would need to really give us a whole picture. As Mr. Dinkelman said, this is one piece of a bigger puzzle, and so So I support this in the way that I think that it's very important and should be a priority for our district, but I also don't support it in the process that you're recommending, so I won't be supporting this motion. Mr. Cook?
Yeah, I agree with President Ruskin. This is, the board's role is the what, it's the administration's role is the how. To have a joint committee come up with the plan, that is not the board's role. Yes, the gap has been there. We have asked previous administrations to address it, and they've come back with their plan, even though it hasn't necessarily addressed that gap. But there is always the board needing to stay in its swim lane and let the people who are trained and educated to do those things do it and come up with a plan. I agree that if we say we want a plan, giving them a timeline, March 16th might be a little bit quick, seeing the data only came last week, and analyzing the data is a big part of this. So I agree with Trustee O'Dwine about maybe extending it out to the April deadline. But it is something that needs to be addressed, and I think the way to do that is by the board instructing the administration to come up with a plan by a certain date, and the board supporting that plan or whatever we can in that.
Do you have any other comments or?
So I'd like to.
Yeah.
I was not prepared for this today. I would like to get a little clarification from Mr. Meinke, is that okay for me to
Yes.
inquire that? Okay, thank
sure.
you. I'm sorry, I'm still trying to learn all the rules.
No.
But I'd like to know from you, Mr. Meinke, when you mentioned possibly doing a joint committee, what were your thoughts with that?
Yeah, so I think it's a great idea to get at a lot of the to really start moving this conversation forward about our students in these subgroups. I think it shows kind of a collective effort on the board's part to say, this is important and we want to address this. But I do believe that there's a lot of meat on this bone, and it's something that does need action, it does need constant attention. And so I think it's an opportunity for us as a district to work with our teams. I can tell you pretty effectively that whatever plan we would be creating by March 16th would probably not be something that you're all really excited about. Because that would also assume that there's not already plans in place. And I can tell you, one of the systems in this district that has been exceedingly robust for many, many years is our MTSS system. And we have interventionists and people who are looking at this data on a regular basis and who have a lot of insight into what has been done. And so I think it would be healthy for this board to have kind of a primer on what has been done to this point, what could continue to be done, and maybe what some of those options are. So obviously, whatever this board wants to proceed with, but I think it would be very advantageous to have a discussion. This topic is something that has been a big issue, not just in Novi, but across the United States and actually the world. So it would be very healthy for us to have this conversation. So I fully support that idea. In terms of what type of a plan, and getting into the specifics of those things, it would be difficult for me to commit to that without really engaging our teams that work at the grassroots level. So, but I definitely think that finding a time for us to have meaningful dialogue about it is very important, and I appreciate the concern and the imperative from the board to look at that.
Okay, so I agree with everything you just said. I would, just for people at home, people here, like to say that this is an issue I feel really strongly about. And I want to be very clear that I'm not in any way trying to tell the people in these subgroups that they should wait longer for action or resolution. What I would like to say about it is that I would like to get this right, and I think it's really important that we do. So I actually had contacted Mr. Meinke on this issue to get more data about how our different subgroups overlap. I don't know if he talked to you about that, Mr. Dinklin? Yes? Okay. Because I think that's important. But I would also like to acknowledge that our DEI committee is made up of 3 white people. And while we are all going to do our very best work, I do think it's important that we get more information than just what I can bring to the table. I don't think that we as a DEI committee are equipped to solve this problem. I don't think our administration individually is equipped to solve this problem. I think we need to talk to the people in those subgroups and ask them what they need. And then I think we need to talk to our staff about if they can do those things and what they would need from the school board as a collective to achieve those goals. So in my mind, that's kind of the path I would like to see us go on this data, to see how we could solve that, because I know we are an excellent district and I think we should be excellent for every kid in our building. That said, I am aware that those students do only have 12 years in the district, and that is a tight timeline when we have kids who are 3 years behind. So I do feel like we need to act with urgency, and I would love if we could set up a joint committee with curriculum and DEI to try to bring those goals forward. But that's all.
Well, I was just gonna say, I agree that this is a very important issue. We've been talking about it for years. And I know, we've talked about it with Mr. Grimaldi, and I know he has talked about, he has some plans. Because every student is important. Every single one of our students is important. And so, therefore, the educators are the ones that need to craft the plan, because they understand it. I'm a floral designer, a realtor, and I have a accounting background too as well. I am not an educator. So I cannot sit there and tell someone that is an educator what it is that they need to do. Our instruction as a board is to tell Ben, our superintendent, that this is important and we need plans made. And they need to come back with a report about how they're going to change the way they do or improve or add something. I don't think it's our place as a school board to come up with a plan. So I will not support this.
Jason, I know that you were next.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure everybody else got a chance to speak first. So I don't think we're that far apart. From what I hear a willingness and a desire for everybody, from everybody that spoke anyway, to do something. And I hear in some of what was said, some frustration that nothing's happened and that you've been dealing with this for a while and it's not something you're happy with and comfortable with. And I think when I'm referring to committee, that's exactly what I'm doing, is asking this joint committee, which hopefully can be our March 2nd DEI committee meeting, because that's a committee of the whole, could invite the curriculum committee and could have that joint committee, which I feel like everybody's in support of. It sounds like the only thing that is maybe a little bit of a leap is being able to come back with something next board meeting. So let me use a quick analogy. So if I'm a manager of Coffee Cup Co., and one of my customers picks up a coffee and the coffee just pours out of a hole in the bottom, I need to work with my team to figure out what that problem is and do it quickly. And I might say, go put together a global 8D is a tool that we use a lot, or use Six Sigma Black Belt approach and come up with use the DMAIC process. But that process starts on usually a single sheet of paper, and it's like, okay, what's the problem statement? Coffee cup leaks. What's the root cause? Don't know. TBD. What are we going to do next? Well, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to call the supplier and see, how their kilns were running, or if they've noticed anything interesting. Another thing we could do is we could check to see if, the ceramic material has been changed or altered in any way in the past month that may be resulting. And you come up with a list of things you're gonna look at, and that's your plan. And it may be a plan that you haven't taken a single action item on, but in my line of work, I'm used to coming up with those plans and presenting them to high levels of management, sometimes all the way up to the vice presidential level. And there may not be a whole lot of work done on it, but it's a plan, and that's what I work towards. And sometimes I try everything and everything doesn't work, and then you gotta kind of start over. And sometimes it's the third or fourth thing on your list that tends to be pretty much solves it all. And you might complete the plan faster than you did, but it starts with putting some thoughts on paper, a problem statement, trying to figure out what root cause is, and then coming up with steps to try and determine that. And then you put in a corrective action, and then hopefully you put in something we can do right away, and then something we can do long term. And that process as a whole is gonna take a very long time, could take years to get the permanent actions in place. They could be very large systems, they could be systems we have MTSS, that's a huge system, it's taken years to roll out. We're still rolling it out to some degree. But that started years ago with a small plan, probably, a group of administrators in Novi says, we're gonna adopt this. So that's really what this motion is all about, is the board's commitment to help put together a plan. We don't execute it, that's definitely not our job, but we provide the leadership to help get some things on paper. Here's what we're gonna work to, we all agree on it, that's what we're gonna do going forward. Then we have a common purpose, a common goal, and something we can work together on. And it's it's really, maybe it sounds a lot harder than it is, but, you know, just getting started is really what this motion's all about. I don't know where it'll go. I do know, to Betsy's point, being a white male, my gut would probably always be to do less and do it slower than probably is actually required, because I would imagine if you're in this situation, tomorrow isn't soon enough. So kind of a halfway compromise, when is the next time the board can actually meet again and review this? That would be March. So why not rather shoot for the moon and maybe miss than, you know, shoot low and get very little done? Which is, sounds like a frustration some of you have already had, is we haven't done enough or shot high enough. So I'm just saying, let's start with a plan. And that's really where I'm at, and I think we're a lot closer than maybe it seems.
Okay, thank you, Jason. Is everybody ready to take a vote? Or you have to do a roll call, correct? Because it was an added motion.
I gotta make one more comment.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Smith.
Jason, I'm listening to you. I'm offended by your comment that this group of people, according to you, has waited years for the board to support. I support them right now. I'm not gonna support this motion. I don't think it's the right way to go. And I would like to hear from the people that we've tasked to develop this plan. I didn't matriculate through Princeton. I don't need an analogy to tell me how a plan operates. I'd like to hear what's in place now and at least start there.
Mr. Cook, do we need a roll call vote?
Let me just, I just had a few comments.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to.
Not slighted, don't worry about it. I do want to remind board members, we used to have in our district a goal on closing the achievement gap. And it sat there forever, and we never really, it just ended up disappearing. I think our previous administration suggested, as we developed new goals, to not bring that one back. Maybe Mr. Cook, you've been around for a while, you might have some additional history on that. You know, certainly, closing the achievement gap is a goal for everybody, not just our district, everywhere. So obviously, I'd like to know what the root cause is. Why do we have an achievement gap? I like to start at the ground level, okay? When we start getting additional data, iReady data from Mr. Dinkelman, I'd like to get from you a baseline, right? Because none of this means anything to me, really, without some comparative data. How do we compare to where we were previously? How do we compare to other districts, other like districts? I wouldn't even know where to start to resolve this issue. And I don't even know if it's a district problem. I don't know if it's a statewide problem. I don't know if it's a national problem. I just don't know. I don't have all that information. I won't be supporting it. I've mentioned in previous votes that we've had here that we have a process for doing this stuff, and I don't like being blindsided. I do support you wholeheartedly on what you're trying to accomplish here. Trust me on that. But I think we have a process, and I think the board works better together if we follow. Well, we have a board operating procedure that we follow for bringing stuff on. I just don't. I think you'll find less pushback if you don't blindside board members like this, and you'll end up finding a lot more support. So I won't be supporting it. I just don't think this is the right way to do business.
Can I make a
Yeah.
comment? Regardless of how you all decide to vote, I trust that there's no disagreement with us still scheduling a joint DEI and curriculum committee, and we could get that on the books so that we can start to quickly get after this issue and discuss it even at the board level. So, you know, I'm just wanting to make sure I'm not going a different direction than however you vote, because that can still be part of our plan is to have that meeting.
Is that what you would like us to do?
Well, you'll tell me what you wanna do.
Well, but
You'll
I'm
tell
saying
me.
in terms of you're,
depending on how the vote goes, if the motion fails, I don't wanna be, I don't wanna assume incorrectly that it's still okay for me to set this joint meeting. Does that
So-
make sense?
yes, that
Okay.
does. So the reason I'm asking what you would recommend is because at this table, I believe you are the only one of us who is an educator. And you are also the person who is working most closely with all of the people who have the ability to really explain this to us and help us solve the problem. When I look at the numbers that there's, 423 students or whatever that paperwork you gave me is, I would like to know from the people who know those 423 students, what they believe we are missing. And I think that you're the person that can tell me that. So do you think that a joint committee would be a course of action that this board could take that would help you to do a better job in regard to those specific kids?
I think it absolutely would create an opportunity for you as a board to make that a priority and
Okay.
to continue to push forward on that, and I think that's good and healthy.
Okay?
And it will allow us to be able to not only discuss kind of expectations, but what are some reasonable goals that can be set. But I think the other part is what is existing currently within our
Absolutely.
systems that are deeply embedded, and where are we seeing some success that maybe this particular data set doesn't show?
Yeah.
Or where are we seeing some gaps that really we need some additional resources to be funneled? And I think having that dialogue with the people who, I mean, we have 1,000 employees in this district, and a lot of them are doing the boots on the ground work at a level that I don't even fully understand. So to be able to give time for them to come and prepare some things, I think it would be healthy to have that joint meeting, for sure.
Can we also have Mr. Grimaldi at that meeting?
I would be
Seeing
happy to
that-
have Mr. Jeremini,
Say,
yes.
oh, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
gosh, Jeremy.
That's
Okay, I was like, who is that?
Yeah, he's our new curriculum guy, did you guys know that? So,
I thought I just really
Mike's
didn't know what was
gone.
going on.
He's not here in fairness, so his nameplate's not up there.
I know, I'm sorry,
It's okay, it's been a long week.
it's been a long week, and it's only Tuesday.
Oh
But,
my gosh.
if, because I know he has talked
Yeah.
about that, like, last year, this was a
Mhm.
topic of conversation.
Yep.
And I know he said he had some ideas, so,
Yeah,
to give
absolutely.
him-
I think there's probably a number of people that would be good candidates to help provide some context at that meeting. Yep, for sure.
Mr. Cook, do we need a roll call vote?
I'm gonna defer to you. I'm not
We don't.
parliamentarian.
Okay. Okay. So, all in favor of this motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Aye.
they,
Yeah.
Motion fails 6-1. Okay.
I do have some questions for Jeff, Mr. Dinkelman though. Real
Um,
simple.
Okay, Jason, just out of time, just a few, and then anything else that anybody at this
cover
table
them.
has, if you can email those to Mr. Dinkelman and Mr. Meinka, that would be fantastic.
Absolutely. So this has nothing to do with the numbers, just on a practical standpoint. You did mention it was K through 9, but I didn't see any ninth grade data in there. It just went up to, looked like it went up to 8th grade.
It's because of the growth aspect of it. Our ninth graders, actually, iReady does not do high school growth data in the same way that they do K through 8. And so we're trying to work with them right now to get those numbers because I think it has something to do with the normal curve, so I don't want to get too in-depth in it, but yes, they measure growth differently at high school because the amount of growth that a high schooler can make is much smaller than K through 8 can make.
And then I was curious, are we also going to review the spring and then the subsequent fall assessments, or do we usually just only focus on winter?
No, we would,
At the
one,
board level.
by law, with the, and I'm trying not to correct my boss over there, it's 98B.
Sorry,
It's all right.
wrong level.
By law, we have to come to you 3 times a year and talk about data and the improvement that our students are making. And so we'll come fall, winter, and spring each year to talk about that. It gets a little bit trickier in the fall because, at least with iReady, they're very much in that year. And so to try to show how did we move from spring to the next fall, we'll just have to get creative on our end, on the data end, to make sure that we can track those pieces. The data we get from iReady comes ready-made for the winter and spring as far as showing that growth, but we can work on the fall piece too.
And then the last question, is this data that you presented, is this going to be put on the district website similar to how the spring assessment is on the website?
Yes, there's actually a report that we have to use for 98B that will show many of the same information, but it uses a template that one of the state organizations gives us to show the growth that students are making. It's not shown as this report, but it's shown differently.
All right, thanks.
Just similar, but a little bit different, a different template.
Dr. Erskine, I have one very fast question. You mentioned the sixth graders were like off of your little
For
chart
reading,
there?
yes, for the
For
growth that
reading?
they were making.
And I just wanted to clarify, were you saying that the sixth graders are routinely that high off the chart, like year to year? That we always have sixth grade?
Part of that has to do with the amount of growth that a sixth grader needs to make is smaller. You imagine a kindergartner, when they're tested in the fall, they have this much growth to make because they're a kindergartner. Sixth graders, as they get older, the amount of growth that a student has to make to
course.
meet their annual growth is going to be smaller. Their projection becomes smaller. It's not as
But the
static.
seventh and eighth graders were more inside that cluster, were they not?
Yes.
So do we know what sixth grade is doing for reading? Because it looks like it's working very well.
Those are things that we're looking into, but I would also say that this is our first year of really giving the seventh, eighth, and ninth whole scale.
Okay,
And even iReady is working with us to figure out, is the seventh, eighth, and ninth grader maybe taking it seriously enough and working with those pieces, so.
it could be that as they mature, they're less interested in doing a great job on their iReady score?
Yes,
That's an excellent
Yes.
point. They may have,
and also we're beginning to, in the seventh,
That's a
eighth,
good
and ninth
point.
grade world, we're trying to give it within a 55-minute class period, and students are more apt to say, I'm gonna get it done today.
I'm gonna guess no on this one, so the test ends sooner?
So,
Okay.
now, we are looking into that. And so this is
Okay.
our first year of giving it whole scale at the seventh, eighth, and ninth grade level, but those are things that we're gonna try to address and look into. And as you said, talk to the students and maybe try to find out from them, like, because our students are not reading at a significantly lower level at the seventh and eighth grade level than they were in sixth grade.
One
They're-
would expect that, yeah.
They are still reading phenomenally well and doing phenomenal things in both reading and math. We believe that there's some other things that are at work there.
iReady is tricky. Thank you,
Yeah.
appreciate that.
No problem, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Dinkelman. We appreciate you and look forward to working alongside you over the next several months, so.
As do I.
Thanks for
Thank
being
you very
here
much.
this evening.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, next, we have our second report to the board, which is the 2022-23 NCSD budget amendment presentation. Mr. Kling?
Ask Mr. Kling to come forward and give us a quick overview of our budget. And as most of you had a work session last week, had opportunity to ask questions, but be an opportunity to share some high-level touch points.
Okay, thank you, and thank you for the opportunity for me to present tonight. This presentation tonight will be the general fund first budget amendment. This presentation was presented on February 16th for information and discussion. I'm presenting it for you, a high-level version of it tonight for approval. Let me get my clicker. Okay, before we jump in, I put a few slides together. Being new to the district, I kind of wanted to get a feel for some of the big factors that go into school funding and the things that kind of affect us year-round and year-to-year. First slide is going to be our FTE throughout the years. As you can tell, that is a good trend. There is a slight dip in 2021. That was, if you guys remember, that was the kind of the year, second year after the COVID, and we kind of saw a big exodus statewide from public schools. So we're seeing a trend back. A number of that was due to the pandemic. Second slide is going to be our per pupil funding throughout the years. Again, a good trend. As you can see in 2010-11, it kind of dipped off due to the financial crisis, and then we've slowly been making our way back up. I will make a note to the top. The School Research Collaborative, this was back in 2018, they're a third-party group. They kind of put a report together that said, what does it cost to educate a student in Michigan? They updated it in 2021, and those numbers turned out to be $10,421. As you can tell, it didn't fit on the graph where that number would be. As you can see, we're clearly under that. So although we appreciate the funding from Lansing, there are third-party organizations out there that kind of say we still need a little bit more funding to educate kids in Michigan. This is, again, the same information, but our fund balance throughout the years. So you can see we have a good trend moving from 2010-11 to 21-22. And I'll kind of go into fund balance later. That was just kind of a graphic for you guys that I know we talked about this on the 16th also. All right, so why are we amending the budget? So as you know, schools have to, by law, put a budget together for the following year. So that budget's going to be put together, your preliminary budget's going to be put together in June. This budget was, the original budget for Novi was put together last June. The problem with that is you don't know a lot of the major things that affect your funding. You don't know your student count, and you also don't know your per pupil allowance. So what we're able to do, thankfully, is come back and say, okay, let's take a look. We know the numbers. Let's take a look at our staff, our funding, and amend the budget. That's what we're doing tonight. So the first column, you'll see the original budget. We're going to start with revenue. This is going to be high level. We're going to start with revenue. Revenue on the original budget was $89.6 million. Expenditures were $90.8 million, with a deficit for the year of $1.1 million. This fund balance, the next line item, is going to be your projected fund balance. So again, this was prior to the audit. We didn't know what our fund balance was going to be. The projected fund balance, ending fund balance was going to be $13.2 million. That's, when you put that as a percentage against expenditures, that comes out to 14.5%. That was the original budget. Now we're moving fast forward to today, the amended budget. When we look at the data and information, we amended the revenue to be $91.3 million, expenditures $91.4 million, with an increase or decrease of fund balance of negative $75,000. So now, going back to the fund balance, we're auditing, we have audited numbers. We've conducted our audit, we know what our actual beginning fund balance is. Our beginning fund balance for the year was $15.7 million, with a projected ending fund balance of $15.6 million. Again, when you put that against your budgeted expenditures, that comes out to 17.1%. So the state requires us to break these, we're going to start with revenue. The state requires us to break these revenues out by function. Those are broken out into local, state, federal, and other, I would say, because there's multiple categories there. And this is how you see the total increase and decrease. You saw local revenues, a decrease of $55,000. State revenues, we saw an increase of $1.9 million. Federal revenues, we saw a decrease of $242,000. And we didn't see any change in the incoming transfers or others. So what is in that? Okay, so these are high-level kind of highlights. Local source, we saw property tax adjusted by $750,000. Local source, we saw other local source revenue increase, and that's where you saw that net of a decrease of about $55,000. State sources, we saw an increase of $989,000. That's due to our UAL retirement funds. Those are kind of based on prior year payrolls. They're the funds that help offset the liabilities of the retirement fund. So they're based on prior year payroll. It's an in and an out. They give us money and then we have to then pay it back for that liability. So as salary and benefits increase, we saw an increase with those funds. A positive adjustment to other state aid adjustments of $724,000, and then Fed sources positive $4,500. So that's revenue. Now let's go to expenditures. So again, the state kind of makes us, hey, you got to break these funds out by function codes. So these are the where are we spending the money. for the new, for everyone who would like to know, these are broken down by different categories. Basic programs gonna be your teachers in elementary, middle school, high, summer school, preschool. Added needs are gonna be special ed, career tech, adult education is adult education. A couple other ones, maybe you might need clarification on, are pupil support, that's gonna be counselors, social workers, health, nurses, and instructional services, that's gonna be professional development, instructional software, things of that nature. The other ones are kind of self-explanatory. Maybe a couple, general administration, that's gonna be your superintendent, board of education, school administration, that's gonna be principals and their staff. So this is kind of how the state requires us to break that information out. And the reason they do that is so that they can keep track of it, right? Ultimately, this is to help information, to help educate kids. So I'm not gonna go through all of them, but as you can see, these, in all of these different function codes, there's salary and benefits, contracted services, supplies, dues and fees, within these functions. And I'm gonna kind of break down, but you can kind of see where the expenditures tie out to that original slide that had a high level overview. On the original budget, we had a total expenditure budget of 90.8 million. On the amendment, that we saw an increase of 91.4 million. So where did we see those increases? Again, we are making this budget, the original budget's in June. We don't know where our staff will be. We don't know, a lot of unknowns. So the major changes, most of our budget is salary and benefits. So the major changes that we saw in our budget were where the updated employee contracts and assignments and benefits. So those are gonna be those first two bullet points. Another big swings were iReady pay. We're hoping that can be absorbed by some grant funding, but as of right now, that's not cemented, so that's gonna be a cost to the general fund. Athletic transportation was increased. Statewide, we're seeing problems in transportation, especially outside of regular school transportation. And then other adjustments, those were a number of different adjustments that we saw throughout the function codes. So next steps, we're gonna continue to monitor revenue and expenditures. This is A1. We're gonna have a final amendment in June. So hopefully that'll go to you in May for information and discussion. And we will kind of monitor these expenditures and revenues throughout the year so that when May comes, we have a very, hopefully much clearer picture on where those funds are gonna be. So, any questions?
Not a question, but just a clarification I would like to offer to the community, since most of you were not at our meeting when we went through this in depth. We did not actually have $86,000 more athletic transportation. We have started transporting various other activities, correct? So it's not just our sports that are incurring that cost. Isn't that what you told us?
Yes, it's in that function, so from the
Yeah.
function code standpoint, it has to be labeled that, but yes, that's
But
more
it's
than
not
just.
just like that, the sports are suddenly costing so much more money.
Correct, yeah.
Thank you.
It's sports and clubs, which are
Et
run
cetera.
under the athletic department.
Et cetera, yes.
Yep.
Very good, thank you.
Do we have any other specific questions? I know that we've had an opportunity to go through this in depth. Thank you, Mr. Kling, for reviewing this again. I know you answered a lot of really great questions earlier and last week. And then just for some clarity for people who are just unfamiliar with school finance and budgeting. So there'll be two things happening now moving forward, because there will be a final budget from this 2022-23 kind of coming forward. And at the same time, the cabinet team will be working through the original budget for the 23-24, correct?
Correct.
And so those will be happening simultaneously over the next several months, and that'll come back to the board in the spring.
Yes.
Any other questions? We're gonna have an opportunity for taking action on this later in our agenda, but we wanted to make sure that the public was given the information they needed for this amended budget. Okay, thank you so much. Thanks for all the work you've done.
Absolutely, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, now we have a chance for comments from the audience. The board respectfully requests that any individual wishing to speak to the board provide their name, address, any organization they represent, keeping their comments to the allotted 3-minute time up there, and refrain from directing comments to individual members of the board, district employees, or members of the audience. Mr. Smith has green cards. If anyone hasn't had an opportunity to turn their green card in, if you could give that to Sheila, and she will get that up to Mr. Smith, and he'll call you up randomly. You can come up to the podium and introduce yourself. Mr. Smith?
I have 2 cards, which Mr. Cook shuffled for me. Looks like we may
You guys are a
have
good team.
a third on its way. Sarah Leppert, please.
All right, hello, I'm Sarah Leppert. I'm a school counselor at the high school. I'm a parent in the community, and I'm also part of the Novi Mental Health Alliance, which is why I'm here tonight. And I put some notes down because I want to make sure I cover everything. But the Mental Health Alliance is an organization whose goal is to help support the mental wellness of the community. We do this by bringing in speakers and organizing events that bring attention to mental health and how to support mental wellness. Over the past few years, we have been working on developing the PEP program in partnership with the Novi Community Coalition. PEP stands for Parents Empowering Parents, and it's meant to be a support for parents who may be struggling with an issue with their children. This could be a life change or event, a mental health struggle, or other challenges that arrive in our children and teens. The PEP program trains parents who have gone through a challenge with their child and are further along the road with their child. They will be connected with a parent who is looking for someone who can really say they understand and they have been there. We know that as parents, there are times it can be very hard to see past the event that is happening. If you have a child who is struggling, it can be consuming and feel isolating. We want this program to help people not feel all alone and to feel like they have someone to talk to. There's a quote that I saw today that says, "What does it mean to hold space for someone else? It means that we are willing to walk alongside another person, whatever journey they're on, without judging them, making them feel inadequate, trying to fix them, or trying to impact the outcome. When we hold space for other people, we open our hearts, offer unconditional support, and let go of judgment and control." And that's a quote by Heather Plett. And I kind of think of that as the parents that are coming alongside those, that they are holding space for their partners or their peers. So there's a training, that's the whole reason I'm talking today. I'm coming up for the PEP program. So parents that maybe want to come alongside and have been kind of through a challenge, whether it be a mental health crisis, it can be anything. You know, you think of maybe going through adoption, having any big life changes. That training's coming up on Friday, March 3rd from 10 to 12 at the Novi Public Library. And if you want to register, there was a peach jar sent out by George Sippel, but the date had to change because of some conflicts. So, but if you register, the date's correct on the form when you're registering, or you can email me at sarah.lephart@novik12.org and I can send you the registration. And thank you for our snow day tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you for ruining the surprise. We don't have our phones up here. We're like, what are you talking about?
Mine's lighting up.
Okay.
My watch lit up and I
Yeah.
was like, oh, okay.
Next, Mr. Smith?
Dan, why don't you stay up?
All right.
Thanks, Dan.
Good evening, Dan Peck. Bittersweet this evening, I guess. As I've said repeatedly, I have 3 daughters at Novi Woods. And later this evening, you will see the retirement of our principal, Asher. He welcomed our family when we got redistricted from Parkview. I know on the first day of my kindergartners, she was having trouble, and he sat with her on the bench. And the man, if you have not spent time at Woods, is just an absolute treasure, leaving enormous shoes to fill. So I wish him all the best in retirement, but for those of you that might not know him directly, he's been amazing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peck.
Thanks, Dan. Sharon?
Hi, I'm Sharon Trumpy. My family moved to Novi specifically because I have a Black child and we were looking for a district that was diverse and that was high achieving. I've been coming to these board meetings since 2019, advocating for our Black students, my black student is no longer attending Novi schools because they were not serving him. I am not the only parent of a black child who has withdrawn my child for this reason. I know it's easy to get defensive. I know it's easy to point fingers. Addressing the lack of progress in this area is not a comment on you as individuals. It is lovely if you as an individual care about our underserved populations. That's not enough. You as a board as a whole, you as an administration as a whole, need to step up and take action. Sitting at the table and telling me you care does not matter. I'm not satisfied to see that the district overall is high performing, high growth. People don't send their children to school hoping that overall the district succeeds. They want their child to succeed. They want their child to learn to read, to learn to write, to learn to do math, to graduate ready for college. They want their child performing at grade level at a minimum, whether they're black, whether they're English language learners, whether they're in special ed, whether they're economically disadvantaged. Our educators alone cannot solve this. Our administrators alone cannot solve this. We need to understand what the problem is before we can actually solve the problem. And that requires asking and listening to the people impacted. For years I've been asking, and I have not seen it happen. Ask your black families, what do you need? Ask your black students, what are your challenges? Our educators are doing their best, but we have also talked about the fact that our educators are largely white females. A white female can try as hard as she wants. She is not my black son. You need to be talking to the people who are directly impacted to hear what they need, or else the problem is not going to be solved. So I am very glad that this is being referred to the curriculum and the DEI committee, but I fervently hope that one of the outcomes of that is that you will actually engage with the black community and with the other impacted communities to ask not to get defensive, but to actually listen to what their children need and to address it. I've only got 10 seconds, but I'm also going to point out, I hear a lot about how great the MTSS system is, and I realize that Darby was one of the main people who did that. She's now at Orchard Hills, and as far as I know, no one has replaced her.
Thank you, Mrs. Trumpy.
Luan?
I actually hadn't planned on speaking tonight, but the iReady scores, and as an African-American parent with a son in the district, this really takes me back to what I've been saying for a long period of time, and that's why we moved to this district. High-quality schools. Really, the fabric of this community is all of us. And my parents, who are past, deceased, are both educators, and they instilled in me the value of education and that I could live my dreams if I worked hard, and that was their philosophy, their mantra. I hold that true to my own family and my own son. And I see these scores, and these aren't scores for just Novi, by the way. This is Troy, Rochester, Bloomfield. This is all the districts. This is, if you look at scores for African Americans, there's a crisis. And what the solution is, I don't know. But I think the approach of digging into the details, collectively working on what might be some ways to address what I consider as a crisis for Novi to become a model district that can share its solutions with other districts. I think that would be a huge opportunity that I think we could help. I personally think that it requires African Americans, the Indian community, the Caucasian community, Asian community, all of us coming together. Because think about it, if the test scores for our community go up, we all benefit. We all benefit
We can be the #1 district in the United States, if not the world, if we can figure this out. And I will say, from the work I do at the university, I think we should also look at ways to bring in technology, artificial intelligence, machine learning, some of the advanced quantum computing out there to do assessments, data analytics using cloud-based tools. We can find solutions here that can be the model for the world. And it just requires us to do a little bit of heavy lifting in the beginning, but that heavy lifting will benefit us as a district, I think, for the future. So if there's any opportunities, I volunteer for whatever it's worth, and I'll be ready to serve in whatever way and whatever capacity. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's it.
We are going to move on to our consent agenda. We have quite a few things on our consent agenda. We have approval of the minutes, the regular meeting minutes of January 19th, 2023, the work session minutes of February 16th, 2023. We have a list of field trips, cross-country team camp, DECA State Career Development Conference, First Robotics State Competition, Michigan Youth and Government Spring Conference, Novi Field Hockey Competition, Novi Meadows Choir Trip, and Novi Middle School Music Festival Trip. If I can get a motion for the recommendation? Mrs. Roney?
I'm making a motion that the Novi Community School Board of Education approve the consent items as presented.
Support.
Recommended by Mrs. Roney and supported by Mr. Mishner. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Next, we are going to move on to, we don't have any donations, so we are going to move on to closed session. If I can get a motion to go into closed session for these two purposes, Mr. Cook?
I move that the Novi Community School District Board of Education goes into closed session for the purpose of negotiations, OMA Section 8.2, and for the purpose of the for real estate discussion, OMA Section 8.3.
Support.
Recommended by Mr. Cook and supported by Mr. Mena. We can get a roll call vote, Mr. Mena?
Trustee Bodwine?
Yes.
Trustee Cook?
Yes.
Trustee Mena, yes. Trustee Mishner?
Yes.
Trustee Roney?
Yes.
Trustee Ruskin?
Yes.
Trustee Smith?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0, and just for logistical purposes, we should not be super long, and we will be coming right back in here to continue on with the action items on our agenda.
I was right.
Alrighty, we are out of closed session and we are going to continue with our agenda. We have several action items to work through. So the first one is Personnel Report A. Mr. Meinka.
Thank you. We are presenting for your consideration the following new hires. Anthony Atanasio, he is the PE teacher at Parkview. Becca Bordner, the social worker at Novi Woods. Aaron Eddy, the benefits and payroll person in this building. Suzanne Finley, the community ed coordinator at the ECEC. Carmen Graves, the HR assistant at ESB. Lauren Keller, the special ed paraprofessional at NATC. And Shika Kumar, who is a special ed paraprofessional at Novi Meadows 6. Retirements and resignations, Mr. David Asher, principal at Novi Woods. Aaron Bodecker, Novi Meadows counselor. Lauren Candela, special ed teacher at Deerfield. Noriko Rosen, who is the Japanese teacher at the high school. And Claire Sandow, who is the adult ed teacher at adult education. The Novi Schools District Board of Education adopts the personnel report as recommended and presented.
Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Do we have support?
Support.
Recommended by Mr. Mitchner and supported by Mr. Cook. Any comments or questions? I know that we're going to have an opportunity to celebrate our very own Mr. Asher, who we know and love and who has been here for years. So although we're sad, he will be with us through June, and we really appreciate everything he's done for us here at Novi Community School District, and we look forward to spending the next few months with him and celebrating him throughout the community.
Yeah, that's basically what I was going to say, because when my kids were first born, Mr. Asher was the first principal we met. And we were kind of bumming that we ended up at Parkview instead of at Woods. So, we're sorry to see him go, but we're happy for him and want him to enjoy his next endeavors.
Okay, any other comments?
It's just Laura's been really busy. I mean, there's quite a list of new hires here.
Yeah. And I think after we approve this, I see
We do
maybe
have
a
some,
few
we
new faces
do
in the
have
audience,
a
and so I
couple
look
people that
forward
would-
to them being introduced. So if no one else has any other comments, we will take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries 7-0.
I believe, we can start with, I believe our PE teacher, Mr. Atanasio is here, is that correct? So feel free to come on up.
Oh, yeah, tell us.
You'll have to correct me, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. Thanks for your patience.
Yeah, no problem. Anthony Atanasio, very close. Atanasio, there you go. First up, I want to thank my wife Jennifer for coming, supporting me today and always. And she does a wonderful job with that, not only supporting me, but our kids. I'd like to thank the board for everything that you do for Novi Schools. Thank you very much for that. I'm excited to start my endeavors at Parkview as the new PE teacher. I'm excited about that. I'm also excited to be part of Novi Schools. It's a wonderful school district, and I'm glad that I'm here. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
I think there are a couple others, no?
Yes.
Yes? Any of you want to step up and introduce yourself?
Hi, Erin Eddy. I'm going to be the benefits and payroll specialist. I actually live in Clarkston, so yeah, it's quite a drive for me, but I'm very, very excited to be part of the Novi Community Schools, and I look forward to working with you guys.
Welcome.
Thank you so
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Carmen Graves. I'm going to be the new HR assistant, and I look forward to working with everyone. I'm supposed to start tomorrow, but thank you for the snow day.
Congratulations.
And I love that you two sat next to each other and you're going to be working in the same building, like instant friends. That's awesome. Okay, we are going to move on to our next personnel report, which is Personnel Report B, NASA Administrators. Mr. Meinka.
Thank you. We are bringing to you the contract renewals for the administrative team. These will be presented to you again in June, as we look at extending them. This will reflect them getting contracts that will be a 2-year rolling contract. I'm gonna list the names of the individuals. Some of these titles are new. I will most notably state that Mr. Jeremini, we're shifting his title away from academics because the role that he fulfills is much bigger than just academics. As well as as Dr. Carino, the work that she does is much more than just human resources. And so to better reflect the work that they do, we've made an adjustment to their titles. I will go ahead and just read the names. Assistant Superintendent of Business and Operations, Devin Kling. Assistant Superintendent of Talent Management and Development, Dr. Laura Carino. Assistant Superintendent of Teaching and Learning, Mr. Mike Jeremini. Director of Adult and Alternative Education, Linda Chinfera. Director of Early Childhood and Community Education, Ann Hansen. Director of English Language Development and State and Federal Programs, Adva Ringel. Director of Finance, Deanna Wheeler. Director of Maintenance, Mike Dragoo. Director of Special Education, Shaylee Patel. Director of Student Growth and Accountability, Jeff Dinkelman. Director of Student Support Services, Darby Hoppenstedt. Director of Transportation, Cynthia Valentine. Assistant Director of Maintenance, Eric Heddle. Coordinator of Early Childhood Education, Stacy Jobe. Supervisor of Communications and Community Engagement, George Sipple. Supervisor of Medical Services, Kathy Ferris. Supervisor of Special Education, Amanda Squires. Elementary Principals, David Asher, Katie Dinkelman, Ryan Francis, Jennifer Murphy. And I know that Mr. Asher is on the retirement list, and that's okay. This contract still fulfills his time as he intends to finish this year. Meadows Principals, John Brickey and Lisa Fenchel. Middle School Principal, Robert Baker. Middle School Assistant Principal, Angie Southworth. High School Principal, Nicole Carter. High School Assistant Principals, Andrew Combe and Ron Kane. High School Athletic Director, Don Wachowski. Virtual School Principal, Emily Polanski. It's recommended that the Board of Education approve the contracts and positions as noted above.
If I can get a recommendation, a motion? Mr.
Yeah, I
Mena?
move that the board approve the contracts as noted.
Support.
Recommended by Mr. Mena and supported by Mrs. Roney. Do we have any questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries 7-0. Next, on our action items, we have the Rohr Center easement. Mr. Meinke?
This is a routine utilities easement. The Great Lakes Water Authority is requesting approval from the Novi Community School District Board of Education to add the current easement area existing on the Rohr Center property located at 41500 Garden Brook Road. A survey of the existing thing was provided or the existing site was provided, and it comes tonight to the board for approval.
If I can get a motion for the recommendation. Mrs. Roney?
That the Novi Community School District Board of Education approve the proposed easement change as presented.
Do we have support?
Support.
Recommended by Mrs. Roney and supported by Mrs. Bodwine. Do we have any questions, comments? Okay, seeing none, I think we're ready for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Next, we have our Business Professionals Tournament Field Trip. Mr. Meinke.
At our last board meeting, we had Darcy Moss, the Novi High School teacher, come to present a new field trip, which is the Business Professionals of America Tournament, where they will compete alongside 2,000 other students statewide and across 60 different business skill events, and it's here for your approval this evening.
If I can get a motion for the recommendation. Mrs. Bodwine?
I move that the Novi Community School District Board of Education approve the Business Professionals of America State Tournament from March 9th through March 12th, 2023.
Support.
Recommended by Mrs. Bodwine and supported by Mr. Smith. Any comments or questions? I know we had an opportunity to discuss this at our last meeting. Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Next, we have our playground equipment resolution. Mr. Meinke.
At our last board meeting, we talked about the playground enhancements that we're going to be doing at the other 4 elementary schools. As you know, the Village Oaks playground was recently completed. So all of our playgrounds at the other 4 elementary schools will be upgraded and have new equipment installed. At Deerfield Elementary School, a total of $128,736.05. At Novi Woods Elementary School, a total of $129,848.99. At Orchard Hills Elementary School, a total of $129,972.70. At Parkview Elementary School, $123,426.45. For a total award recommendation with a 10% contingency of $563,182.61, which is coming from the 2014 and 2019 capital bond project funds and sinking fund, I apologize. That is there for the board's approval this evening.
Thank you. If I can get a motion, Mr. Smith.
Chair, I recommend that in the best interest of the Novi Community School District, the Board of Education award Penchura Landscape Structures with the equipment and installation for the noted elementary buildings totaling $511,984.19. In addition, a 10% contingency is recommended at $51,198, bringing the total recommendations for an award of $563,182.61. Further, that the Assistant Superintendent of Business and Operations be authorized to expend the funds from the 2014 bond capital projects funds and the sinking fund.
Thank you. Do we have support?
Support.
Recommended by Mr. Smith and supported by Mr. Mishner. Any comments or questions? Mrs. Bodway?
Just, if you could refresh my memory, the timeline for this was that this was all gonna be done over the summer, correct?
Yep, they're gonna break ground as soon as they can in the spring and get everything ready for the fall start.
Okay, and then with that tight of a timeline, we don't anticipate the contingency being insufficient, correct?
We have Mr. Donnelly.
Mr. Donnelly, if you wanna
Thank you, Mr. Donnelly.
share?
So I know we've had a lot of issues with price fluctuation generally in the world right now, so that's a little tighter timeline. Do you think we should be pretty close on this?
Yeah, I don't expect that there's going to be any unforeseens where we're going to have to substantially dip into the contingency. So I think that number will be pretty much intact when we're complete.
Maybe things will even get less expensive.
Yeah.
He laughed.
We're just hoping,
It's stabilized, but I can't say it's
Sure
going
thing.
backwards.
Thank you.
Mr. Mishner?
Yeah, so I'm grateful to see the schematics of the different layouts. I was curious for Deerfield, just because I have more intimate knowledge of that playground. We talked about last month about removing the tire swing structures, because there's no more tire swings. It was still on the plan, and then I was also curious where the four-seater teeter-totter was going, because I couldn't tell from the layout where that was placed.
My knowledge, we are going to remove the tire swing. Stu, you might be able to help us out with the teeter location, because I had the same question when I was looking at it. I think it's within one of the new structure areas that we're putting in.
Okay.
But I do know that we're going to be removing, I think maintenance is going to do it, remove the tire swing, because I know that's been a hazard to the students or something that we want removed.
So is the teeter-totter going more towards what's currently the grass area where the...
That's my understanding of where it's
workout
going.
equipment is?
Yes, I know it's not a very 3D rendering for as far as the layout, so it was kind of hard to determine that, but that's my understanding where it's going.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, I think we're ready for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. We'll call you back up in a couple more minutes here, Mr. Donnelly. We are going to move on to the 2022-2023 budget amendment. Mr. Micah.
On on February 16th, the Board of Education adopted had a meeting to reflect on the budget at a work session recently last week, and the budget that was presented tonight for your approval for the 2022-23 budget amendment is presented.
Can I get a motion for the recommendation? Mrs. Roney?
That the Novi Community School Board of Education adopt the 2022-2023 budget amendment as presented.
Support.
Recommended by Mrs. Roney and supported by Mr. Mena. Do we have any additional questions for Mr. Kling, who did a fantastic job for the hours that he spent with us? We appreciate it.
Thank you.
With a new baby.
With the new baby. Okay, seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. We will move on to our final action item, which is the OCSBA bylaws and resolutions.
The Oakland County School Board Association Resolutions and Bylaws Committee reviews and recommends amendments to the association bylaws annually. They come to the board annually for approval in February, and the bylaw adjustments that are presented from that committee are there before the board for approval as recommended.
If I can get a motion,
Sure.
Mr. Mishner.
recommend that the Novi Community School District Board of Education approves all OCSBA bylaws and amendments and resolutions as presented.
Do we have support?
Support.
Recommended by Mr. Mishner and supported by Mrs. Roney. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, we are ready for a vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries 7-0. We have 3 items for information and discussion. The first one is bid packages Novi Meadows Phase 1, High School Phase 2. Mr. Micah.
Thank you. So as you can see, we're building a pretty large building next door. And we also have Phase 2 of the high school, which represents the outside athletic area, but also the athletic offices. And we're calling it the athletic gateway to the rear end of the building. And so these packages really represent the furniture that is going to be recommended at next month's meeting. What I will tell you is that while this is a large document, you know, you'll have time to digest that as far as you want to go, whatever rabbit holes you want to go down, and we will get the answers to those things. So Sarah Watson is here from TMP, as well as Stu from TMP, and obviously you know Kevin Donnelly. So I think they're going to give just a quick synopsis of the process and what this package entails, and then you know, if you have any brief questions, they'll be there for you.
Absolutely. So just to start, 2 separate furniture packages, the first being for Novi Meadows Phase 1. The documents that were shared outline the scope of furnishings that were included. There was a very extensive engagement process that we executed that included staff, administration, and as well as students over the course of about 9 months. And the end result is the furnishing package that is in front of you today. We also planned the furniture for Phase 2 in order to maximize volume discounting, to look at the full scope of the project instead of by phases, because it really depends on the volume that takes you into higher tier discounting with furniture. And then for Novi High School, Phase 2, as mentioned, that is mainly contained to athletic spaces, being the athletic gateway, as well as the athletic suite, and then a few internal spaces being the robotics lab and flex lab as well. Engagement happened for the high school as well, a little bit less extensive as that was a smaller effort, but staff, administration were included in that process as well.
Thank you. Do we have any specific questions? Certainly if they're unable to answer them, or if you think of something, because this is a very big package, and it will take a little bit of time to really review it extensively. You can send that through, Mr. Micah, and we'll get that to them.
I was
Yes,
just
Mr.
curious,
Commissioner.
I was trying to figure out where we are to budget for this. I see the total bill and everything that we're buying.
I can speak to that. I know when we realigned the budget and kind of projected out what we had left to do with the bond program, we established a $4 to $5 million FF&E budget, which included the robotics equipment that was previously approved, and then all future FF&E purchases, knowing that the Meadows addition would be the largest of the remaining purchases, and we are within budget. In fact, I don't expect that we'll spend the $4 to $5 million that we have budgeted.
Thank you. Mrs. Bodway?
Thank you. So I'm sorry, your positions, you guys are the people that spec'd out the furniture and did the design?
I am, yes. So I
Okay,
am the
wonderful.
lead interior designer, and I've been with all the Novi bond projects throughout the course of the bond.
Wonderful. So this all looks beautiful. I was really excited with like the whole design elements and all that. I thought everything looked very well put together and the colors were awesome. I did have a couple questions on the cafeteria in Meadows that I was hoping maybe you guys might be able to answer. And I'm just looking at this floor plan in detail kind of the first time this weekend, so forgive me if there are things that I should already know. But when I glanced at this, it sort of looked to me like we have booth seating there, and is that correct?
Yep.
And then is there kids sitting up above that?
Yep.
Okay, and then I'm sorry, I have a student this age and another one coming through. That seems maybe like it could be problematic to me. I'm curious if this has been implemented in other districts at that same age level?
Yep, absolutely. We have case studies that show, I would say Hull Prairie being kind of the case study that we've used for Novi
sorry,
Meadows.
where was it?
Hull Prairie, which is a Ohio school
okay,
in
cool.
Perrysburg that we have used as the case study throughout the course of Novi Meadows. Visited with staff, they have a very similar dining situation as well.
Okay.
We've also brought in the chairs and stools that are gonna be used in the cafeteria, left them at Novi Meadows for about a month and a half.
Okay.
And so they had a chance to test those out, make sure the height felt right for them, and we've really vetted all of the furniture choices with students as well as staff.
Okay, wonderful. I'm happy to hear you guys did so much research on that. With the way this is set up, is there something that would prevent our 10 and 11-year-olds from like pushing things off the counter onto the people sitting below them?
Yeah, so the way
Can you
it's
tell me how
built,
we're handling that? 'Cause
it's much like
my
the
apologies. This is
No
my
worries.
immediate thought was, oh, that's gonna be messy. How will this work?
Yeah,
So,
it's much like the podium that I'm standing in front of now, and the wall goes up higher than the counter that they would be sitting at. So
So-
there's like a 6-inch barrier that wouldn't allow them to push things right over.
wonderful. So the students sitting at that counter height will not have the option to drop their sandwiches on their friends. Excellent. I'm so happy to hear that. Thank you for clarifying.
You're welcome.
I'm sorry, this is the age that we are at now, and I'm like, oh, I don't think we could sit at a table with our friends underneath.
And I should note that the principals at Meadows have been highly involved in this process and excellent leaders in this effort.
And they both know this age group very well, I'm sure much better than I do based on their vast experience. So thank you so much, I appreciate that.
welcome.
Thank you for answering my questions.
Maybe they'll push the sandwiches at home, but not at school.
Right. Well, seriously, my first thought looking at it was, well, how is that not gonna be very messy? Because, I mean, okay, thank you.
Yes, Mr. Commissioner?
I did have one other thought. So I recently got the pleasure of touring around in Village Oaks, and they showed the special ed space that's pretty new, but they pointed out some of the architectural shortfalls for that space and how it was designed, and I'm wondering if we've learned lessons from that in the furnishing and equipping of the special ed areas in Meadows. Specifically, they had some architectural features that echo, which is really hard for children that have, sensory learning. And it also seemed like it was undersized in general, so did we get some lessons learned from that build and incorporate it into Meadows?
Absolutely. In both the Novi Meadows instance as well as Village Oaks, we work closely with Shaylee Patel on the design. Specifically for the furniture for Meadows, we talked about what wasn't working at Village Oaks and improved that, looking at maybe different behaviors that are coming into play now in the special education community that weren't necessarily prevalent when we were designing Village Oaks. All of that has been taken into consideration with the furnishings. You'll notice dividers that were included in the Meadows package. That was a specific response to a request from Shaylee as well.
Oh, excellent.
Thank you. Any other questions, burning questions, I would call them? Okay, Mr. Cook?
Yeah, have you, well, like, we've recently kind of refurnished all of these schools, and have you taken into account furnishings that are very similar, that are usable and still in good condition so that we can keep the budget down?
Yes, everything that's been purchased within the past 10 years at a minimum is being reused at Novi Meadows. We did an existing furniture inventory that was completed by all staff members, and that was taken into account. Most of where the existing furniture is coming back into play is in classroom environments, so there are no new student tables and chairs being purchased for classrooms because those had all been upgraded and there's enough quantity to support the new building. Cafeteria tables are being reused, music risers, just to name a few. There's more elements as well, but we've certainly done a deep inventory of existing furnishings as we looked at the new furniture package.
And then the dining area is a multi-use area for, it's kind of got a little stage there and everything. Is the seating such that it can be easily moved out and just regular chairs? And I was just kind of looking for storage area for if we're gonna have a whole bunch of chairs we're taking up and down.
There is a dining storage room right off the back of the cafeteria, and we are including chair carts in this furnishing package, so those can stack and be moved out of the space on demand as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry, I've got one more.
Yeah.
Are the special ed classrooms on both floors in this
Yes.
building? Okay. And that's something Shaylee's comfortable with transportation, all of that?
Yes,
They're right next to the elevator.
yes.
Excellent, that was a
Yeah.
question I had, because I know, like, in the event of an emergency,
Mhm.
if we have students in wheelchairs upstairs or things like that, that's,
Yep.
Directly adjacent to an elevator, also in a pretty core center area of the building, intentionally designed that way, so they are a part of everything that's happening
Love
in the
that.
building
Thank
and
you.
not pushed off to the sides or the back.
and in the event of like a fire or something of that variety, how would the evacuation be addressed? Would the elevators still be running in a situation like that?
I cannot speak to that directly, but I'm sure we could.
Could we find out, because that would be.
We can gather some more information.
I'd appreciate
to
that,
see
thank
what
you.
the plan would be for a 2-level building, for sure.
Okay, thank you, that's all then, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you guys for being here. I know it was a long meeting, but we appreciate all the work that you do on the daily for us here in Novi, and we're super excited to see some of these new things come to fruition.
Us too.
Thank you
for having us.
Okay, we have 2 more items on our information and discussion agenda. City of Novi land swap update, Mr. Meinke?
So I just wanted to update the board. You took an action to approve an original instrument on the land swap. Had the opportunity to talk with our attorneys. They've been working with the city attorney very closely. One of the things that I would just say is that our attorneys are recommending that we bring another instrument back to you. I've included that in your packet, but this instrument is going to reflect a few changes. A couple changes that are not reflected in this instrument are things that have come up at the city's request. So I had the opportunity to go to a city council meeting. They had a hearing at their planning commission. Some of the residents are a little concerned that the school district might sell the property that we're acquiring through this property swap. The other concern is that we might take down too many trees. So the question that will be asked of you over the course of the next month and then before the next subsequent meeting, and this instrument would include potentially, would be the city's request to have a mutual first right of refusal clause, which would mean if any of the property that we acquire in this swap were to be sold, the city would have the first right to purchase it back. And vice versa, if the city would to sell one of the properties that they're acquiring, we would have the right to purchase it back from them. So that clause is something that they're looking to establish, as they think that that will help some of the residents that have that concern. And then also that we would follow the tree ordinance as legally applicable for us, which we already do that in all of our cases, and so that's not really a concern for us. But just wanted to make sure that you and the community were updated, that the hope would be that those 2 things could be considered, and at our next meeting, you could approve a final instrument, to which case, hopefully, we would be very close to the finish line at that point.
Thank you. Any specific questions? Certainly you can send that if something comes up, but thank you for all the work that you've done since you've been here, and we look forward to bringing this back for approval next time and moving this along.
Mm-hmm.
So, thank you.
Yeah.
We are going to move on to our final information and discussion item, which is the NCSD branding guide.
So this is this guide is something that you have in the packet, and really just, if you have feedback, I'd love to, hear your feedback. I will tell you, this has been through a multitude of iterations. We worked with a local contractor, Printnology, that has helped us with some of our logos. As we continue to construct new buildings and spaces, we're gonna need to have signage across the district. And so being able to bring a system around the way that we brand our school, as you know, in most board policy documents, our logo is something that we don't just give out. And so we have to, as a board, approve, this is gonna be our official logo, and these are some of the parameters that we're gonna use. We have received some feedback from a couple of you, which we can make some adjustments that, for example, putting the power cat, backwards on certain types of, paraphernalia and things like that, that's totally acceptable. But we did do we've had some conversations with some of our families and staff around this, and the original lettering was a little smaller and more narrow. They've kind of beefed it up a little bit, but it does give us a little bit of a fresh look with the power cat as the O, and just kind of modernize our logo a little bit, and provide us with, the ability to brand ourselves a little bit more consistently. So that's there for your consideration at our next meeting, and if you have questions or feedback, I'd love to hear it.
No? Okay.
You can make a few
No.
comments.
We're in trouble.
A couple.
Well, actually, so this isn't blindsiding, because I actually did send these via email, I think, a week or two ago, or whenever I saw it. But a couple of them, though, we've been using the PowerCat, 'cause I remember doing a historical search on this, going back to maybe 1990, 1991. And the original agreement with Kansas State University, because the PowerCat is from Kansas State University. Our original agreement with them was that we would have to pay them $1 per year, and I know that's probably gone up a bit since then. I think they added a couple zeros. Just curious, are we still in compliance with whatever agreement we have with them? Can we take and alter that, and that's not gonna cause an issue?
I did ask that question. In terms of the payment details, I'll have to get back with you on that.
I
'cause
don't care how
know
much
that,
we're paying
but-
for it,
Yeah.
it's minuscule, that's irrelevant.
Yeah, but I do know that we have the ability to add it and adjust it within our N and the logos that we, have. So what we would be doing is in compliance with their agreement, because I did ask that question. I'm not sure about
Okay.
the longevity of that payment, though.
But the big question, we've historically had two different color varsity jackets in this district.
Yeah.
Boys Kelly green, girls forest green. Does this affect that at all?
I don't know that it affects that. If you ask the students, and I have asked the students, and they like the system that they have. But one of the things that this does affect is if you go to any, so we talk about the green being Pantone, which is actually a combination of those two greens. And I'm colorblind, so I can't really give a really detailed explanation of that. I'm telling you what our team is telling me. So that looks green or brown, or maybe even gray. But the bottom line is that this green is supposed to be a combination of the two greens. And so, but of course, there has to be an understanding that Under Armour or Nike or Adidas might not carry that exact green. It might be close, but we're trying to get away from our printed materials or things that we're putting out there, having like a neon green version and a forest green version, if you will.
Okay, so again, nothing's gonna change as far as the jackets.
That's not, well, from my perspective, no, the students really like their,
I should say,
their
this
system.
isn't going to change that.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
Any other questions right now? No? Okay. Thank you for the work that you guys have done on this so far. I know that the team has really, I saw George in your office one day working hard on this and collaborating with you on all the details. I think it's such an interesting document to see all the do-nots. Oh, yeah, don't do that, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like,
oh, we've done that.
Exactly, don't put it sideways. Okay, we will move on to the superintendent's report.
Thank you. So I'll keep my comments brief. I did want to read an email that I received this past week. I had the pleasure of going to the National Conference on Education this past week. It was a phenomenal conference. I have lots to bring back and share. There were over 5,000 superintendents and other educators sharing ideas across the country. There was a good contingent of Michigan superintendents there as well, and I had the opportunity to interact with them also. But it was difficult because MSU happened last week, and I know a lot of people, that has been really heavy. I know it's hit home for a number of you in really personal ways, as you have had family members there. But I would like to say that in the midst of all of that, I did get this email, and I thought it was worth sharing. I'm not gonna list the name, obviously, but I'll just say, my two recent Novi graduates are freshmen at MSU. Thankfully, they are home safe today. My students knew just what to do when the shooting happened, and I attribute that all to the active shooter instruction and practice they received while attending Novi schools. My daughter Emma ran to her dorm room and was joined by two other friends, Novi graduates, who upon shots being fired, dropped everything at the nearby Union where they were eating and ran. The three sheltered in place in the students' dorm room, and all three MSU students locked the door, barricaded, sitting in the dark in silence. I knew that my kids were academically well prepared for college by Novi schools, but I did not realize how well the district prepared them for something like last night. I am now even more grateful for the education my child received, and still one receiving, from the Novi Community School District. Thank you for everything the staff is doing for our community's children. And I think that in the midst of all of that, it's helpful for our staff to hear that a lot of the measures that are in place and have been in place long before I got here are making a difference and are very important to protect our students. And so something to be proud of and maybe a highlight, you know, in the midst of a very bad and horrific situation. Today was professional development for our teachers. I had the opportunity to visit with our 512 teachers. Mr. Geremini was very active in all the buildings as well as our coaches, and they did a fantastic job collaborating, and I'm sure he'll have an update on that at his report in March. I did also want to let you know that we have had a student board representative interview process going on at the high school. So I'm happy to report that they have 34 candidates that are interested. It used to be that they couldn't beg someone to do the job, and now they have 34 kids that are really excited about sharing their voice with this board. And I think that's a really cool showing. So at our March meeting, I hope to be able to introduce to you a couple candidates that will be able to provide the board report and some updates. We launched the podcast this past week. I'm actually going to release the first episode tomorrow. We filmed 2, we have another one coming. I'd like to just highlight, DeJuan Woods brought up a comment a couple board meetings ago about sharing the expertise of our community. We have a lot of very talented people. One of the things that we're doing is we're bringing people onto our podcast who are experts in certain areas, and we're asking them questions. The podcast title is called Courageous Curiosity, where we ask questions about things that we're curious about. And so we're going to talk about things like, why is play so important? That's going to be episode 2 that'll be released next week. And we bring in people who are experts. We talked to a professor from Wayne State University who is a social gerontologist on why play is important, as well as some of our own teachers and staff. In the first episode, we examine why are we curious or not anymore, and then we're going to have episodes coming up on the Chat GPT and AI. We're going to have conversations about why we can't talk about politics at the dinner table anymore, why are books being banned. There's going to be a lot of fun topics that we uncover and we're just curious about, and we're going to invite our community members into those conversations as a way of hopefully sharing some collective experience. And so I appreciate just the suggestion and also the idea that we have so many talented people to tap into. And then I also want to just mention that board meetings are often difficult times for the community to actually interact with the board. It's not really conducive for that. Board meetings are board business times, and so you're here to obviously attack a bunch of things. So I'm excited for some of the feedback I received from some of you on the idea of launching board roundtables, hoping to do that maybe in the month of March. But the idea with board roundtables is that it would be an interactive experience. I have coffee with the superintendent coming up, and that's an opportunity where people can come and sit with me and have dialogue. Board meetings aren't really set up for that, and so I think oftentimes people feel like they want to have more of an interactive experience, and I know for many of you, you want to interact with the community in different ways and get their input, and so this would create an opportunity for a few of you at a time, no more than 3, to be able to sit down and have open dialogue and conversations with board members. So I'll be working to start getting some of those scheduled and in an effort to try and create kind of an open sharing opportunity, and then you all can kind of get on a rotation and hopefully be a positive opportunity for our community to engage with the board on top of some of the other ways that they can. So all is well. We have a lot going on in the district. I know it's been a long meeting, so I will refrain for my other comments and refer them to the next meeting. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Micah. We will move on to board communication. I know we had opportunity for celebrations, but if anybody has, not tonight because Mr. Kling already gave a nice two meeting report, and the other administrators are off today.
Okay, just
So
trying to keep you.
keep me on task.
You don't
Yeah.
have more you want to tell us.
I know it's on this agenda, Mr. Miller.
Not that I can think of.
Okay, so any
I said I
board
appreciate it.
communication additional, Mr. Commissioner?
Yeah, it's been a really busy winter. I got to do the walkthrough with some other board members of the high school and Meadows and Parkview, get to see some of the kids in action in class. I surveyed some of the kids and asked them what I should expect as a dad, the 6th graders for my son when he gets into Meadows, and their answers were both very insightful and also hilarious, but practical. I got to go to Toast of the Town and represent our district there at that event. And then Deerfield's been very busy. They had their Find Your Passions, which used to be Sharpen the Saw. And and it was like the first time since I can remember where there was actually snow, so one of the events has always been sledding with Danny Taylor, and I think this is the first time I can remember that he's had snow, so the kids could actually go sledding with Danny Taylor. And I got to help build, Home Depot always comes in, so I got to help some kids build, what was it this year? Flower, windowsill flower pots. The Deerfield is also in the middle of their Heart Challenge, so I got to go in and help out and teach a bunch of fourth graders how to do CPR on dummies. So they actually had the fourth grade class, we're very daring by Mr. Taylor to do this, but he had the fourth graders in all the grades, I believe, come in and actually practice on real mannequins how to do CPR, so that, you know, if they were ever in a situation, they would be a little more prepared than nothing. And some of the fourth graders actually were quite proficient. I was actually really impressed. And they took it very seriously. I also got to go to the Parent Connect and hear from the community. I think I've talked to you, Superintendent Micah, about, mostly they wanted to talk about the crossing situation at Wixom. And I appreciate you getting involved. There was a squad car there that morning, and then we haven't seen anything since. So I think we still have some work to do there, but I think that went a long way to at least let them know that they're being heard. And then we had the family movie night. It was the first night, family movie night at Deerfield, that I got to attend, and they got to watch Bad Guys. And the gym was packed, and the kids were full of energy. I think they really enjoyed being together and around and watching a movie together. And then I also, as the building rep for Village Oaks, was fortunate enough to go and tour Village Oaks with Principal Dinkelman, and also attend her staff meeting today and hear a lot about Tier 2 support and iReady and this new tool I've never heard of before, AVMR. And it was really, my biggest takeaway from that, it was really fascinating to see the passion that our educators had. The energy was palpable, but also the tension of, I want to do so much for my kids, but I only have so much time and I only have so much resources. But I came away encouraged to see that there's definitely a drive and a will to do and be more for our kids. And I can't wait to figure out how we can unlock some of that potential, because there's a lot of really great energy in that room.
Thank you. Any other board communications?
Just one that, I think, it's Thursday, the robotic open house. I was thinking it was tomorrow, it's closed, but Thursday, robotic open house, I think from 4:30 to 6:30, at the high school, of course. So that's pretty awesome. And then, of course, NEF Green Gala, April 15th. Tickets are on sale now.
Mark your calendar.
Sounds good. I had the opportunity to go to OSTC for Principal Carter's Coffee with Carter, and there was some, her and Mrs. Lepard talked about the IBCP program there and the traditional OSTC opportunities, which was great. So if you have a high schooler who is interested, I encourage them to attend. I just saw, I think it was in Peach Jar or one of the communications that went out from the high school, that high schoolers are able to take a field trip. So maybe if a high schooler is interested in it and you missed an opportunity, or your family wasn't able to take you to the open house, I encourage you to find the email from today, and there's a Google document sign up that the high school counselors will actually take you over there to take a peek and see what's being offered over there. So that was a great opportunity. Any other board communication? No? Okay. Thank everybody for their patience tonight. We had a lot on our agenda. I think it was great. We got a lot of work accomplished, and thank you for our community members for being here always and for sticking it through till 9:39. So if I can get a motion to adjourn this meeting?
Motion to adjourn?
We have support? Support. Recommended by Mr. Mishner and supported by Mrs. Bodwine. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0.